What's up guys, it's Brandon Flash. Welcome to my channel. Today marks 1 year of ownership of my 2015 Model S 70D. I bought it as the cheapest all-wheel drive autopilot-equipped Tesla in the country. Yesterday I hit 150,000 miles on the odometer and I bought it with 106,000. I happen to know the whole history of the vehicle, so let's go over it. I'll show you guys how it stood up, any repairs I've had to do, and just my overall ownership experience and what you should look out for if you're in the market for a used Model S, or if you're considering keeping your Model S until high mileage. For those that are new to the channel, welcome. My name is Brandon Flash. I produce a variety of different content about Teslas and electric vehicles as a whole. I take a little bit different approach than most people. I actually go out and drive my car. I drive it hard. I drive over 40,000 miles a year and I document a lot of that for you guys. I don't do anything too special with my car. I do take care of it, but I'm not one of those people that keeps it in the garage as a garage queen. I'll take it off-roading, I'll take it through mud, I'll take it through dirt. Feel free to check out my vlogs. Hit that subscribe button down below so that you can see future content. If you're liking what you're seeing so far, hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And without further ado, let's go over the condition of my car. Let's start with going over the physical condition of the car. We'll start with the front end. That tends to be where cars get the most abuse on the paint, just being that that's where rocks and bugs and all that stuff hit it. So let's take a close look. So there are obviously some rock chips, nothing too crazy. This car does not have any paint protection film, anything of that sort. Most of the chips are kind of in here on the bumper. Hopefully you guys can see that. Some chips and stuff on the nose cone. Some peppering on the front edge of the hood, but nothing too crazy. Overall front end's in good shape. Fog lights have some chipping, of course. Overall paint is still in really good shape. Shortly after I bought this car at about 110,000 miles, I had a full paint correction done. So a 2 or 3 stage polish, as well as OptiCoat ceramic coating. So overall, car's in really good shape. I did add this carbon fiber spoiler here. This is off of a newer Model S. All 4 door handles do still work. We'll go on that. We'll go over that in a little bit. This piece is popped down, but I just need to reattach it. There's one screw that holds it on underneath, and then the tabs go back in. I just haven't gotten around to it. Looks like it is cracked though, so it's gotten a little abuse. These are not the original wheels that came with the car. These are the Model S Aero wheels that were only offered in 2014. I got these through a crazy deal on Craigslist and put them on the car and sold my originals. Not a whole lot of rock chipping through here. Obviously it is a little dirty. I washed it last night, but can only do so much. Not any chipping there. A couple small chips through here as expected. That's kind of a heavy impact point from road debris from the front of the vehicle. It does have some very minor hail damage. I don't know if you guys can see that. I just never bothered getting it fixed because it was so minor. I was caught in a small hailstorm in Minnesota. All right, so that's the exterior condition of the car. Why don't we move to the inside? This car does have the gray next-gen leather seats, and they've actually held up surprisingly well, but let me show you guys. All right, so we'll start from the driver area. Seat is in overall very good condition. It of course does have some. All right, I tend to wear pants and shorts that have a zipper on the right back pocket, and unfortunately as I get in and I kind of slide back into the seat, that has scratched the leather a bit. I've put some conditioner on it. It's helped, but it hasn't done a ton. But for 150,000 miles, this seat's in pretty good shape, and this is actual leather. I've conditioned it a bit over the time that I've owned it. Another common wear point is the B-pillar here, because a lot of people will brush that as they get in and out of the car. I'm pretty aware as I get in and out of my car, so it hasn't worn much. I don't know how the previous owner took care of it, but mine's in good shape. Steering wheel, also in good shape. No significant wear on the leather. I cleaned it up a little bit when I bought the car, and this steering wheel actually has been replaced at one point. We'll go over that in the maintenance. Touchscreen is delaminating. as well as the instrument cluster is also delaminating. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll touch on that in future planned repairs. Here's the passenger seat, in better shape than the driver's seat. Carpet is in like new condition underneath the mats. It had carpet mats in it when I bought it. I've added these Max Spider 3D mats just to help keep it in great shape. I am a huge fan of these mats. Again, not sponsored or anything like that. I just really like the mats. Let's head to the back seat here. I do drive lift occasionally in this car. I've done over 200 rides in this car. The C-pillar trim is holding up well. Back seats, they do have some scratches in them. I believe the previous owner maybe hauled some cargo or something at some point and scratched them up. But leather itself is in really good shape. Even on the right rear, this C-pillar trim also holding up really well, even with lift passengers that tend to not care as much. The striker plates are holding up well. Seat backs, no major scratches, a couple scuffs here and there, but 150,000 miles, that's to be expected. Same on the driver's side seat back. Headliner does have some marks. Just need to clean those up. I've hauled some wheels and tires in here, so nothing that's unexpected. This is a body color roof car, so it does not have any sort of sunroof, which is a little bit of a rare option. Let's head back to the trunk. I do have these liners here, so that protects it, but even still, the carpet in the trunk is in really good shape. There are, of course, some scratches here. It's a car, I haul things in it. I'm not super careful when I load and unload things as I maybe would be if it was newer, but it's a car after all. Some marks on the bottom side of the trunk. Again, not too concerned. The door cards are holding up really well, no major marks. Even the driver's side, no real marks here. A little bit of fraying on the stitching, but I wouldn't consider that to be abnormal. The buttons for the windows, the finish is peeling a little bit. That's a pretty common thing on these Mercedes switches. So Tesla actually sourced these switches from Daimler, Mercedes, and these are fairly common to have this happen. Volkswagens of the early to mid 2000s also do the same thing. So yeah, that's overall physical condition of the car. Tires are in good shape. Yeah. So those that watched vlog number 12, you saw that I mentioned that I was going to be getting some new wheels and tires. Unfortunately, that did not work out. It was a bit of a misunderstanding. I was under the impression that I was going to be getting wheels and tires for the price that we agreed to, but he had already swapped the tires from those wheels onto his new wheels. So they were just bare wheels, and that's not something I'm interested in. I already have wheels, but these tires are getting a little bit worn. They have almost 30,000 miles on them. So I'm kind of planning for in the next 10,000 miles, which is only a couple months for me, to have to replace those tires, but they are wearing really evenly. When I bought the car, I did an alignment, so that helped a lot on the even wear. But yeah, let's talk about ownership cost, ownership experience, as well as maintenance. All right, let's talk my purchasing experience with buying this used Tesla. I did buy it from a third-party dealership, not from Tesla, not from a private party seller like a lot of people do. So I found this car on a site called onlyusedtesla.com. They're a great resource if you're looking to buy a used Tesla. They're one of few sites that can actually sort by battery and things like that. Looking on Auto Trader, Auto Tempest, all those kinds of sites, it's really hard to sort by battery, being that so many vehicles are poorly listed on there. If you see me looking down, I've got some notes here on my iPad. So I looked for about 3 months to buy this car. I had a Chevy Volt prior to this, as well as a Fiat 500 Abarth. Once I found this car, it was actually in Vegas. At the time, I was living in Minnesota, Minneapolis area. And it happened to work out that when I found this car come up, I contacted the dealer right away. Turns out it had a deposit on it within 24 hours. I thought, whatever, not meant to be. I'll move on, find something else. So a week or two goes by, the dealership reaches out to me. It turns out the trade for that buyer fell through. So the vehicle was now available again. So I hopped on that opportunity. I picked up the phone, put a deposit on it right away, gave him a card over the phone. Then we went over some more of the details, tried to negotiate out the dock fee. Unfortunately, that didn't work, but whatever. And it happened to be that this was about 2 weeks prior to when I had to go to California anyway for some other matters. So rather than flying into California, my dad and I, he went with me to buy this car. We actually flew into Vegas, which the flight was much cheaper, so it worked out really well. After I put the deposit on the car, I listed both my Chevy Volt and my Fiat 500 Abarth for sale, and both of them sold within 48 hours of each other. I was without a car for a few days, but that was fine. This was actually the cheapest all-wheel drive autopilot-equipped Tesla in the country. And I was pretty set on getting all-wheel drive, and autopilot wasn't even optional for me. I had to have autopilot. Some people like getting a Tesla without autopilot. I'm not in that boat. Once you've experienced autopilot, it's hard to go without it. So I got that. It was a really cheap flight. We flew in really early in the morning before the dealership even opened. It was like a 4 or 5 a.m. flight. Took a lift to the dealership, hung out outside while we waited for the dealership to open. It's a small little shop, but they actually sell quite a few used Teslas. Took care of all the paperwork, bought the car, and then we headed right to LA. So we stopped in Baker, Barstow, all the kind of common stops between Vegas and LA. So it was really nice to buy a car and then immediately hop on a 400-ish mile road trip and drive to LA. So that was a really great way to experience my new Tesla. We were in LA for about a week, tried out a bunch of different superchargers, drove all around. Autopilot is an absolute game changer in LA traffic. If you've ever been to LA, you know what LA traffic is like, and it's unlike traffic anywhere else. It is just ridiculous. It's bumper to bumper all hours of the day during normal times. After that, we drove it back to Minnesota. We went through Colorado, through Nebraska, all those states. It was a really fun drive, supercharging all along the way. This was my first time taking a real road trip in a Tesla. I had driven Teslas from Minneapolis to like Iowa, Wisconsin, things like that, but never a true cross-country road trip. So in the first 10 days of owning this car, I put about 4,500 miles on it. So to say I broke it in for my ownership was an understatement, and I loved every minute of that trip. The only downside is once we got on the road, we did realize that it had a bent wheel in the rear. So that was kind of unfortunate. It was a little bit shaky on the drive back. Once we got back to Minnesota, I did get that corrected as well as an alignment and some new tires. So that's something I did first thing when I bought the car. And yeah, so that's kind of the buying experience that I had. We'll go over what you should look at if you're buying one a little bit. All right, let's talk about the configuration of my Model S. It's a 2015 Model S 70D. The 70 battery pack is actually an 85 battery pack with 2 of the modules removed, which makes it a 350 volt pack rather than the 400 volt pack. And they use the chemistry of the later 85 packs, which was pretty well proven and doesn't really have a whole lot of degradation or slowing due to supercharging issues. So the 70 pack is a little bit of a hidden gem in Tesla's used car lineup, so I highly recommend it. This particular car, it actually has coil suspension, meaning it has normal springs instead of air suspension. That gives it a little bit firmer, sportier ride, which was something I was looking for. It also reduces some of the potential headaches and repairs that go along with air suspension, just being that it's a simpler system. Rather than having a sunroof like a lot of Model S's do, this vehicle has a body color roof, which basically means it's just a metal painted roof. If I had my choice, I would have had the solid glass roof like the new Model S's have, which is just a fixed pane of glass and doesn't have any of the issues associated with sunroofs like leaking or binding or glare or anything like that, just being that it's very heavily tinted and it's fixed in place. One of the few options this car does have is having the next gen seats. So those seats were made by Recaro. They're a lot more comfortable, a lot more bolstered than the standard seats, and I'm a huge fan of them. I put many hours on these seats and I love them. They're probably the most comfortable car seats I've ever experienced. Model 3 seats are very good, but I haven't had quite enough seat time in them to know for sure if they're better or not. This car does have Autopilot 1, which was something I was absolutely looking for. I did not want a car without autopilot unless it was just an absolutely screaming deal. I don't think that you should buy a Tesla without autopilot. I think it's one of the killer features. Once you've experienced driving with autopilot in traffic, you don't want any other car. Even just driving along the highway, it just takes away so much fatigue and stress and makes it that much easier. And that way you can actually enjoy driving when you get to the roads that you want to drive on, like the mountain passes, the quick sections, whatever you enjoy. It makes it that much more enjoyable because you're not dealing with the tedious and strenuous parts of driving, which is just staying in your lane and adjusting speed. Autopilot takes care of that for you. You essentially just have to babysit it, always pay attention, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting. This car does not have the premium package or the Sub-Zero package. So what that means is it doesn't have rear heated seats and it doesn't have the heating coil for the front wipers. And the premium pack means it doesn't have a rear power liftgate. It just has a manual liftgate with hydraulic struts that hold it up rather than automatically opening and closing like all newer Model S's do. It also does not have fog lights from the factory. I've since added those. They are plug and play. They just need to be enabled by Tesla. I've done that. It also does not have lights underneath the door handles like the premium pack cars, and it has bass audio rather than the premium package. Bass audio is still more than plenty. It's still really good compared to most cars. I'm happy with it. Would I like premium audio? Yes. Is it worth doing anything about? No. This car also has free unlimited supercharging for life. If you've watched some of my vlogs, you see that I take full advantage of that. It saves me quite a bit of money with the amount of supercharging I do. And it's more of a mindset than anything. Supercharging isn't very expensive to begin with, but when you have the mindset of, I can drive anywhere, and then I pull up to a supercharger and it's free, it's just a very freeing mindset versus thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to charge and it's gonna cost me $7 to $15 depending on the car and state of charge and everything. It's just nice not having any cost at all, even if that cost is minimal if you do have to pay for it. When this car was brand new, it was actually rated for 240 miles of range from the EPA. And this vehicle is actually the most efficient Model S you can buy, short of the new Raven models that have a permanent magnet in the front, which is similar to the rear motor on a Model 3. The reason for that is it has the dual motor configuration, which allows it to use torque sleep to be in the most efficient manner possible whenever you're cruising down the highway at kind of a steady speed. And being that it has the 70 pack, it's actually a lot lighter. So this vehicle is very efficient as far as Model S's go. I routinely see below 300 watt hours per mile and 240 miles. I didn't own it when it was new, but it was probably pretty attainable if you tried. As far as battery health goes, I do have a video all about that. I do an actual range test. Check that out. I'll link it for you. But right now, this vehicle will charge to about 218 miles, displayed at 100%. Obviously, that's not the end-all, be-all, but it can give you a pretty good indication of battery health. That's indicating that it lost just under 10% of its original capacity over 150,000 miles. When I bought this car at 106,000 miles, it was displaying 222 miles. So to lose about 4 miles of range in nearly 50,000 miles is very good in my opinion. And I'm totally happy with that. I'm able to run it from 100% all the way down to 0 without any issues. Some people do have issues. If they do deep discharges, it'll end early. I haven't experienced anything like that. My car has been perfectly reliable as far as drivability goes, and I'm very happy. And I'll go over some maintenance things in just a moment. Continuing the talk about battery health. So when I bought this car, it was originally from LA area. It has been sold at auction and then went to Vegas. So I suspect this vehicle has probably been supercharged quite a bit over the years, being that the LA area has quite a few superchargers. And I've personally charged this car in the last year over 350 times at superchargers. That totals out to over 8.2 megawatt hours. So that's 8,200 kilowatt hours. In contrast, I have home charge on AC charging, just about 7 megawatt hours, so 7,000 kilowatt hours. So I do primarily charge at home. However, I spend a lot of time out and about, and when I lived in Minneapolis, there was actually a supercharger about a mile from my house. So oftentimes I would stop there on my way home if I was pretty low, That way I wasn't arriving home with a low charge and I could take advantage of those off-peak rates without the vehicle sitting at a low state of charge. And also that way I saved on my electricity bill if I'm using free supercharging for 10 minutes before I get home and cutting out 20 kilowatt hours. It's worth my time to stop there. And it was actually at a Hy-Vee, which is a grocery store in the Midwest. And I actually did most of my grocery shopping there. So it worked out pretty well that I could just stop there on my way home, grab whatever I needed, maybe grab food. They had a restaurant and everything. So yeah, I supercharged quite a bit. And even with all that, I still only lost 4 miles of range in about 50,000 miles. So I'm very happy with that. Just a side note, some people have had their vehicles restricted on the amount of current that a vehicle can pull on a supercharger. Some people are seeing as low as like 60, 70 kilowatt peak. This vehicle still will pull 112 kilowatt, and it'll hold it about till 15% state of charge or so. So it still does have a pretty aggressive ramp down as far as charge current goes, but peak, it still does pull 112. When I first bought this car, it would pull 118, but I believe that's not at all associated with how I've treated the car or with the condition of this vehicle in particular. I believe it is just a software change when they did change the charging curves for these older vehicles. All right, let's get to what you've all been wondering, maintenance and repairs. So this vehicle does have the original battery pack as well as both original drive units. That means they have not been replaced. The drive units are composed of the motor as well as the inverter. And typically whenever one has an issue, Tesla just replaces the whole unit, and they are all original on this car. That essentially means that this car has the original powertrain. No repairs have been done and it's still held up this well over 150,000 miles. There's no abnormal noises or anything like that. So I don't see any reason why those would need to be repaired or replaced anytime soon. But if they do, I'm actually still under the 8-year unlimited mile powertrain battery drive unit warranty until 2023. So I've got a lot of time. I'm not at all worried about it. That's still about 3 years from now when I'm filming this in April 2020. So this car hasn't had too crazy of a service history. I'll kind of go over some highlights and then I'll just cycle through some images, including all the maintenance and repairs that have been done on this car. But as far as highlights go, this car has had 7 door handle replacements. 2 of them I've done myself. I did the driver front as well as the passenger rear door. When I did those myself, I actually used an upgraded kit from a company called EV Tuning. So instead of replacing the paddle gear, which is what makes the door handle go in and out when you walk up to the car or when you lock it. All right, so rather than that gear being a cast piece of metal that can be brittle, they use a machined gear, which is a lot stronger and a lot less susceptible to failure. The other thing that fails on these door handles are the wiring harnesses. So there's a wiring harness that includes 2 micro switches. And what can happen is that those micro switches can actually get corroded. That can happen. As well as the wiring that goes into those micro switches. Due to repeated bending and the use of a fairly brittle standard automotive wiring, it can actually break off or fray just enough that it can short or lose connection. And that will cause the door handle to either no longer present when you press in on it, or when you pull on it, it will no longer open. When that paddle gear fails, the door handle will no longer go in or out, which can be rather annoying. So both of those, when I did it, I actually replaced the paddle gear as well as that harness. The EV Tuning gear, as I mentioned, is stronger, and the harness that they sell, they actually use a surgical grade wiring, which is a lot more flexible, and they actually reroute how it goes on the door handle, so that way it's less susceptible to breaking, and they use reinforced attachment points as well as some kind of bracing on the wiring. So that way, even as it does flex, it's less likely to break at that connection to the micro switch itself. So while the high voltage battery pack in this vehicle is original, the 12-volt battery was replaced in 2018. That was done at 86,000 miles. So I'm anticipating that will most likely need to be done this summer, especially now that I'm living in the Phoenix area. With the intense heat, that does kill batteries. And luckily, there's actually 2 local companies here that sell upgraded or replacement batteries. There's Omu, which makes a lithium ion replacement battery. That one is about $450, so I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to go with that option. There's also Gruber Motors. They make a replacement lead acid battery. They're also in the Phoenix area. So When it comes time to replace that, I will do it myself, and I'm going to replace it with one of those two options depending on the research that I do and the pros and cons. The OMU will last a lot longer, but the Gruber is about a quarter of the cost, so we'll see what I decide there. This vehicle has had 16 Tesla service visits over the 150,000 miles. 6 of them were done via mobile. So mobile service is something that Tesla offers that I don't know of any other manufacturer that offers at scale. What that means is rather than you having to go in for service, Tesla actually comes to you, and they'll do it in your work parking lot, your driveway, your garage, whatever the case may be. They'll do the repair. You're on your way. It doesn't inconvenience you at all. So that's pretty handy. Some of the door handles were done via that service. No suspension repairs have been done on this car, so it's still all original suspension. With that coil suspension, it's a lot more durable. All the control arms are original. It does make some noise here and there over bumps, so eventually it probably will need some control arms or some bushings, things like that. And that's to be expected on any vehicle with 150,000 miles, especially one that weighs as much as a Tesla does. So I'm not too concerned about it. I'll take care of that as it comes up, or maybe if I have some extra cash, I'll do that. Or I'll maybe end up just selling it before it gets to that point. As far as weird items go, or items that have needed to be replaced, this steering wheel was actually replaced for the left control button being pushed in. So it has a little roll wheel. Sometimes those do break and they get pushed in. So that's typically user error. That was done before my ownership. So I don't know if the guy pushed on it too hard or what the case was, but that broke. Steering wheel was replaced. The turn signal stock was actually also replaced. So from the notes that I have, it looks like this turn signal stock was replaced because whenever they would activate the turn signal, it would actually turn on the high beams as well. So obviously that's not ideal. I don't know the cost of those items, unfortunately. I would guess the steering wheel probably wasn't cheap. Somewhere in the $800 to $1,000 range would be my guess. If someone knows, please correct me in the comments. And the turn signal stock, I would have to estimate probably in the $300-400 range, maybe less. Tesla repairs tend to be less than you would expect for whatever reason. And as far as repairs that I've had done by Tesla in my ownership, I've actually had 2 service visits since I bought this car. One was a mobile service visit for some service bulletins. So they actually replaced the liftgate drains as well as doing the Takata airbag recall for the passenger side airbag. And then once I moved out here to Phoenix, I actually had a service visit for having a small coolant leak from the front 4-way coolant valve. So I got a coolant warning that my coolant was low. I checked it out myself, being that I'm pretty handy. I pulled out the frunk bin. I topped it off. I took a peek in that area. And there was some slight evidence of leakage from that coolant 4-way valve, so that controls the various flows of coolant throughout the cooling system. So I had Tesla replace that. That repair cost $160, parts and labor, which I thought was very reasonable. That's not even worth doing myself. And the night before I had that scheduled service visit, I actually had a warning for the charge port door sensor. And the charge port had been acting a little bit weird the couple days prior to that. I didn't think too much of it until I got that warning. So when I went in for that service visit, I brought it up and they took a look at it, and turns out it needed a new charge port door, being that the sensor is part of that door. That repair, parts and labor, was $185, which again, I thought was very reasonable. Both that coolant valve and the charge port door, likely if it had been a BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, really any other brand, those repairs probably would have been double. So I'm very happy with the cost of repair and service experience on this vehicle, even being out of warranty. I'm not too scared of repairs. At that same service visit, I did have a windshield done. That was about $1,350 parts, labor, tax, and I did pay that, but insurance reimbursed it, so that doesn't really count. And that was just due to a rock chip, and that was actually the original windshield on the car, which is pretty crazy at about 140,000 miles when that happened. So that can happen on any car. Rock chips happen, not the end of the world. That's what insurance is for. Highly recommend having zero deductible glass coverage on your insurance. If you don't, great to have. All right, let's talk some future repairs here and some things that I'm anticipating. As I mentioned in the physical walk around of the car, the screen on both the instrument cluster and the media control unit, which is the big touch screen, the screens are actually delaminating, which means that the top layer of the LCD panel is detaching from the physical display itself. Obviously not ideal. These screens weren't really designed for automotive use and the extreme temperatures and conditions that they're faced with as such. So I am planning on doing the MCU2 upgrade, which is the newest hardware for the touchscreen. And as part of that, they actually replace the entire touchscreen unit as well as the entire instrument cluster display, being that on MCU1, which is what my car has, the instrument cluster as well as the media control unit displays are controlled separately via separate computers. So that's why both have to be replaced. My vehicle still has 3G connectivity, which the networks are actually phasing out of. So that's kind of a dying technology. So I'm going to have to upgrade that at some point. And that's also part of the MCU2 upgrade. And for those that are familiar with older Model S's and you kind of keep an eye on the repairs that are needed on them, you know about the Emmc failure that can happen on these vehicles. So essentially there's a flash chip that controls the media control unit, and that flash chip, it's pretty low capacity and wasn't really designed for the constant reading and writing that the Unix-based system of the MCU does. So over time, that chip just wears out and eventually it fails, which will cause the screen to go black. You can no longer charge the car. You can no longer control the climate control. And essentially the vehicle is partially bricked. So there are some services that will replace just that chip, including Gruber Motors in the Phoenix area. There's a couple others across the country. That repair typically runs about $1,800. So to be able to get both screens replaced, the LTE upgrade from 3G, the eMMC chip repair, as well as just a much faster and better experience, is well worth $2,500 to me. Another item that I'm planning for, or I should say 2 items that I'm planning for, the right front door, so the passenger front door, as well as the driver rear door, are older door handles. So I'm planning on replacing those with the paddle gear and upgraded harness from EV Tuning. I keep one of those on hand. That way I don't have to think about it and I have it and I can take care of it in about an hour if it happens. That way no one's having to struggle or reach through the window or anything like that to be able to get in the car. That's just annoying, and that way I can use those upgraded parts rather than having to go to the Tesla service center and buy the parts that are simply going to fail again. Yes, the paddle gear from Tesla is $6 versus about $80 from EV Tuning, but to save the hassle of having to do it again is well worth that extra money to me. So now that we've gone over my ownership experience, you're probably thinking, maybe I should consider buying a used high mileage Tesla. Well, as long as you take the proper precautions, I would definitely recommend it. So here's some things I would recommend taking a look at or keeping in mind as you consider a used, even low mileage, high mileage Tesla. General rule of thumb, always buy the newest and largest battery Tesla you can. You're never going to regret buying more battery than you need. And it's great to have on road trips. It increases charging speed. So even if you really only need that standard range plus Model 3, unless it's truly a city car for you, if you plan on taking on road trips, having that long range will just be a much better experience. You'll have shorter charging stops, being that you don't have to use as much of the battery pack. Take a look at my vlogs. You'll see some information as far as the taper of the battery over charging, and using that bottom 50 to 70% of the battery pack is significantly faster than having to deep charge the battery pack and charge it up to 80-90% to get the same or similar amount of range. I would definitely recommend buying a car with autopilot. AP1 is still very good. It's just something to keep in mind is that you're not going to be getting new features. You are going to be a bit left behind feeling. So if you're a technology aficionado like I am, you may want to consider getting a newer Model 3 or newer S or X, or even a new Model Y. So that way you have the latest hardware and you're not having to worry, when am I going to get left behind? Oh, am I going to get all these new features? That's just not something you'll consider, being that for a while you're going to have every newest feature until the next greatest thing comes out. If you are buying a car with hardware 2, 2.5, or hardware 3, I would recommend having full self-driving enabled. That adds quite a bit of value to the car for resale. If it has enhanced autopilot, you can actually buy full self-driving capability at a lower price. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you're buying a car with low miles or you're buying it new and you want to keep the best value for resale, definitely recommend putting some paint protection film on the front end of the car. Tesla paint tends to be a little bit softer than most, so it does get rock chips, as you guys saw in the physical condition walk around. So I would definitely recommend doing that. If you're buying a used car, be on the lookout for one with paint protection film. That way you're not getting a chipped up front end that you look at it and you think, oh, well, I didn't put that mark on it. That's unfortunate. That way it's protected, and if you ever get a big blemish, you can just peel that film off and put new film on. If you're looking at older Model S's like I have, the next gen seats, as I talked about, definitely worth getting. I probably wouldn't even consider a car without them. The next gen seats are that good. As far as battery packs go, I generally would not recommend buying an older 60 kilowatt hour car, or buying a car with the really early 85 packs, nor would I recommend the 90 pack. So that essentially leaves the 70, the 75, the late 85 packs, as well as the 100 kilowatt hour packs. For Model 3 and Model Y, that's not even consideration. They're all great. They use that newer technology with the 21700 cells rather than the older 18650 cells. So that's not something you need to worry about if you're buying a used Model 3 or Y. If you are buying a older S or X, I would ask about the MCU. Has it been replaced? Has the eMMC chip repair been done? Otherwise, I would plan on spending that $2,500 to upgrade it to MCU 2. You get all the benefits as I mentioned before. And if you're buying a Tesla to save money on gas, if you drive a lot, the more you drive, the more you actually save. So if you're someone that drives over 20,000 miles a year or even less, you have a gas hog, you might be close to paying for the car, or at least a decent chunk of the car, or at least the difference between a similar gas car and the Tesla, just in gas savings alone, not to mention maintenance and all those associated costs as well. Some people like to buy the extended service agreement or extended warranty that Tesla offers. I'm personally in the boat that I don't think it's necessary, but I'm also a very handy person and can take care of a lot of repairs myself. I believe last I checked, it runs about $5,000, which is not worth it to me. If I were to talk to someone that's a little bit on the handy side and can take care of minor things themselves, I would recommend putting that $5,000 in a savings account and putting it away for if you do have something large go wrong, like an AC compressor or the MCU. That way you have it, but you're not just throwing it away if you end up not needing it. Would I buy a high mileage Tesla again? Absolutely. At the moment, I'm a bit torn on what I'm going to eventually replace this with. I've been keeping an eye on the Model S 100D market, and those are coming down in price. So at some point, I might buy a unicorn of those, as they call it, which is a late 17 model that has hardware 2.5. It'll have free unlimited supercharging, and then you can actually upgrade it to the FSD computer as well as MCU 2, and it's essentially like a brand new car with free unlimited supercharging. I may also get a Model 3 or get a Model 3. I really want the faster charging with how much I drive, so that's a consideration as well. If you're a techie, buying a Model 3 is probably a better play than buying a used Model S. You're going to get the latest tech, and I just think it drives a little bit better. It's a lot sportier. To some people, that means rougher, but I personally don't mind it. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy some of my other videos. Please check them out. Again, don't forget to drive more, worry less, and the future is now. Thank you guys for watching.